May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So last week I commented that the central image for the sermon was easy because it was, oh man, I usually look over at the choir a lot to make sure they're involved. It's like, Betty, I'll still talk to you. So I talked about how the central image was easy because it was right here in front of us. We have this table full of candles, and that was an easy image to latch on to carry us through the sermon. And I think it's safe to say the opposite is true this week as I looked at this perplexing gospel text, and I won't tell you how many times I read it on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, trying to figure out what on earth Jesus is trying to explain to us this week. It's a weird sort of text, and Jesus has a weird sort of point that he's trying to make, and so I think it's probably best today just to dive straight into it and see if we can't make some sort of sense of what Jesus' point is. And the first part is the easy part. The Sadducees are trying to trick Jesus. The one thing that's very clear in the text is the Sadducees are trying to trap Jesus. We know this in part because 7 verses before today's gospel lesson, it explicitly says that they came to trap him by what he said. And then also we know it's a trap because this example they've chosen is so extreme. It's an extreme hypothetical, not just a widow who marries her husband's brother, but who does it 7 times. It's this extreme example. And so I probably should stop quickly and say that if this whole widows marrying husband's brother thing is tricking you up, that is a thing that is strange to us in 2019 America, but would have been very commonplace in first century Palestine. It's actually part of ancient Jewish law that when a widow's husband dies, that the brother, if able, should marry her as a way of protecting her, because in this culture, a woman just off by herself is in a vulnerable spot, and so having the brother marry her is a way of ensuring that she is protected and cared for. So hopefully that helps, that context helps with that a little bit. But the Sadducees aren't really concerned here about the protection of the widow. That's not their point. They're trying to give Jesus a riddle. They're trying to give him a test. And if we need even more proof of this, we see it because their question is about what will happen in the resurrection, despite the fact that these are Sadducees who don't even believe in a resurrection. So they don't care at all about the widow. They don't care at all about the relationships that are at stake. They just care about trapping Jesus, about tricking him, about getting him cornered where he has to say something that's going to anger one side of the population or the other. But it turns out Jesus is pretty clever too. And instead of taking the bait, he basically dismisses their question altogether and essentially says that marriage is something that is of this age, and trying to talk about it in terms of the resurrection just doesn't work. It's like apples and oranges. In other words, they're wasting their time by even arguing about such a thing. And for good measure, Jesus goes on to proof text them about, yes, there is a resurrection, pointing to Moses' encounter with the burning bush, where God reveals God's self as saying, I am the God of Jacob, of Abraham and Isaac. God is the God of Isaac and Jacob and Abraham, not God was the God of them. And so this present tense means surely these people who are long since dead still exist in some way, hence a resurrection. But that's not really Jesus' point today. And in fact, I think Jesus' point is that the Sadducees are missing the point. The Sadducees' question isn't grounded in what matters. It's disembodied. It's an abstraction. It's a time-sucking argument about something that ultimately we can't know and has no real effect on how we live here and now. And yet, it's where they have decided to focus, despite the reality that there is plenty of important things for us to be doing here and now that we could focus on. And that, I think, is a point that resonates. Because it's something that I think the church continues to struggle with these 2,000 years later. How often does the church focus on things that just aren't that important? How often does it spend its time on questions that don't matter? How often does it fill its agenda with abstract debates and dilemmas? Because there's a lot of ministry to be done. There's a lot of non-hypothetical widows in need of care. There's a lot of poor and marginalized and voiceless people who cry out for help here and now. There are lonely and isolated people who yearn to experience the community of the gospel. And yet so often our focus is on other things. And I won't name those other things too specifically because I'm not trying to call out any specific things that we might argue about, but I do think that this is a temptation that even we in this room can fall to. I know certainly I do, and I imagine I'm not alone. Not the only one who gets all worked up about whether this or that happens in a certain way, or bothered when we do this instead of that in worship. And so I think it's important that all of us ask ourselves, what are the things that are really important to us about our church? What are the things that I really, really care about? The things that I need to be a particular way? And are those things that are important to God? Are those the things that God is most concerned about, or would our time and energy be better spent on other things? It's a challenging question to ask because it reveals that even here in this place, we get sidetracked by things that we aren't called to focus on. Like the Sadducees, we become more concerned about being right or having things fit our way of thinking than doing the actual work of ministry. And that's a shame because the work of ministry is the whole game. It's the everything of the why we do what we do. It's been said the church is an institution that exists solely for its non-members. And ain't that the truth? The call of the church is not self-serving and it's not abstract. It's for real and earnest and meaningful ministry towards our neighbor. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to remind us this week. I've said the last couple of weeks that I want to focus my sermons in November on what is the gift as we go through this stewardship season, talking about grace happens and the way that we experience God's grace and the gift of grace in the day-to-day, minute-to-minute of our lives. I want to focus on lifting up some of these gifts that we experience in God. And so I've asked the question, what is the gift? What is the gift that we experience this day? What's the gift that is revealed to us gathered together in these moments? And today, the gift is the ministry itself. That we are immersed in meaningful, life-giving ministry that does matter. Ministry that isn't abstract or disembodied, but is supporting our neighbors in real and tangible ways. And so, how appropriate it is that months ago it was decided that today would be our Celebrate the Food Pantry Sunday. As you know, the food pantry, I meant to fact check this better. Does anyone know how long the food pantry's been around? For sure?
It's over 20 years.
Over 20 years, all right. So, glad I didn't just start throwing numbers out there. I'd heard how long it was a long time ago. But yeah, over 20 years. The food pantry at our father's been around more than 20 years. And it remains still one of our signature ministries, one of the things that is most identifiable in our outreach. And I remember when I was first starting to serve here at our Father, and I was asking questions about how things worked, and I was asking about the food pantry, and was told that there's no budget item for the food pantry in the congregation's budget. It's not supported in that way. And so I said, well, then where does the food and the money come to do it? And was told, it just comes. People just give. People buy food when they're at the grocery store and drop it off on their way back home. Or they write checks and someone goes out and shops for the things that we need. It's not something that's consistently supported in the budget. It's something that's just maintained by the community. I was also told that there was a certain someone who, if things were looking particularly lean, would go and fill their car with just completely full of food and drop it off to make sure that there was always food here in the pantry. And it was only after his death that I learned that that was David Wilson. And so as I understand it, there have been an awful lot of people throughout these 20 plus years who have been integral in making sure that the ministry was maintained. People who've given of themselves and given generously to make sure that this ministry continues to bless our community in all these ways. And David was certainly one of those people, and his generosity and passion helped the ministry keep going in some of the leaner years. And that's one reason why at the end of worship we'll be dedicating the food pantry in his memory. David knew that the ministry is the gift, that participating in outreach and helping our neighbors and caring for others is the gift. It's not just for them, but for us. That there have been countless people throughout the years who have worked tirelessly on the food pantry and given generously to it, and they do that because they understand that the doing of that, the ministry, participating in the ministry, is the gift. And we so often think about ministry as being a gift for others. What a gift it is to our community that we have a food pantry. What a gift it is to children who receive Lutheran World relief boxes from us. What a gift it is to the children at Sedgefield Elementary that they get Christmas presents from us at Christmas time. But that's only half of it. Because it's also a gift to participate in the ministry. It's a gift to us to work side by side with God in serving our neighbor. If you ask the people who serve in the food pantry on Wednesday mornings, they'll tell you it's a gift to serve. It's a gift to engage with our neighbors. It's a gift to utilize the resources of this congregation to feed this community. And that's a gift that's not just limited to the food pantry. It's a gift to work with our youth and instill the faith, hope, and love that we all experience here into them. It's a gift to go to the elementary school and read with the kids and establish relationships with them. It's a gift to participate in the drive-through nativity and welcome people to experience the Christmas message with us here in this place. It's a gift to engage in life-giving outreach ministries in big ways and in just the minute-to-minute of our lives. It's a gift to meet the cashier at the grocery store with kindness and gratitude. It's a gift to be present to our co-workers and make them feel valued and appreciated. It's a gift to acknowledge the ways that God is moving in our lives and in our world. It's a gift to tell people that we love them. As we've talked about the last few weeks, the gift of God's grace is a call to respond. The gift is a call, which means that the call is also a gift. And so answering the call of Christ is a gift. And it's a gift that David and so many others have experienced through the food pantry and all the other ministries we have here at Our Father. It's a gift that we find in water and word and bread and wine. And it's a gift that brings life that is not just eternally long, but eternally deep and eternally profound and eternally meaningful and eternally full. Thanks be to God. Amen.